constantly reflecting what it is that's real and what it is that is acceptable and what it is that is happening and who it is that you are and who it is that I am, that's happening in all of our interactions all of the time. Well, what if we as a group are not agreeing necessarily on a reality, but we're agreeing on these rules of the game, basically, these questions of what is it, how is it, and what is it that we are relating with. When you're able to have this kind of constant sense of inquiry about what it is that's happening around you, you walk around with a very different potential for generating something new in this life.
The container is now open. On today's episode, we're talking about how the practice of circling is, of course, it's an amazing way to connect in present moment awareness, but it's also a way to surf through reality and hop into different reality tunnels. And we're going to get into this extremely juicy topic with one of the greats in the field, Andrew Venezia. He works as a psychedelic guide, as a what did you say, Andrew? Integrationisto?
I think I did, yeah. Integrationisto. I meant to say integrationist, but I like that.
Integrationisto.
Yeah.
He does. Your offer is so deep, but there's also so much breadth. And it speaks to the far-ranging mind and consciousness experience that Andrew has, and that he'll be bringing on to the container today to talk about a topic that is so exciting to me, and I think is really, really important as the global circling community continues to develop and move into stranger and stranger territory. But before we have this conversation, we would like to shout out our patrons. They went to patreon.com/thecontainer and signed up, committed to making small monthly donations that help keep us afloat. And also shout out to everyone who likes and subscribes and leaves comments and ratings and reviews. These are free, and I know you hear every content creator says like and subscribe, and it's easy to pass over, but these are free and fast ways that you can make a big difference in how we perform in the all-powerful algorithm created by the demiurges archons, forming the labyrinth that we are trapped in as we struggle to reach gnosis and escape from the hell world that we find ourselves in. So Andrew, Before we really get into it, can you kind of give us sort of a brief look at your path, how you got like to where you are today?
I have been, let's say, I've been interested in meditation and in awakening for most of my adult life. I was a materialist atheist for most of my teenage years, and then I had an experience when I was 20 that changed that quite radically. And for about 10 years, I'd been meditating and doing some psychedelics, and then I had an experience in a master's degree program. So I have a master's degree in integral theory, and in the first meeting that we went to for our cohort, I had an experience of what was being called at the time we space. So I prefer awakened interbeing today. I think that's a better term, but it was called we space at the time. And it just totally blew my mind, shifted my sense of what was real, what was possible. And it set me on a course of research for writing my thesis that had me do a bunch of different practices and train in a bunch of different methodologies. And one of those was circling. And when I found circling, I loved it, but also sensed like, where my interest was in the more transpersonal aspects of relational practice. So I spent a lot of time in the last 15 years then, energy and heart and effort in essentially marrying the practices of awakening from the Indian traditions and from the Tibetan traditions and interpersonal practices such as circling and some other things. And that's been my that's been my hasn't exactly been my path, but it's been my life's work. And then also, I'm very passionate about, or it's a core thing to me to like, you're not just having some kind of experience in a cave or in a room by yourself, right? But the meaning of all of these practices is, well, what kind of a person does that make you in the world? Like, how does it interface with, the so-called real world, right? And that's also, yeah, something that I'm um, uh, carries a lot of meaning for me and is really central to what it is that I help people with and teach people. So, thus, Integrationista, and trying to, it's great to have these experiences, whether they're on psychedelics or whether they're meditation or whether they're, in a relational practice, but you want to be able to bring those into the person that you are in a day-to-day way, into your waking consciousness.
I noticed this term awakened interbeing as a way to hold a set of practices, including something like circling. And it has me wanting to hear. I know that you write a lot about circling and have a lot of thinking, a lot of good thinking towards this. So to kind of continue to set our table, for the listeners, I wonder if you could give sort of your brief description of what circling is as the practice that will be the territory we'll use, or like the space we'll use to be traveling through these different layers of reality.
I think of it might be better to start. It might be better to start backwards, but circling basically is just the practice of being present with our experience as it actually shows up to us in relationship with each other. And why is that? Why is that foundational? Why is that transformational? Um, how we what it is that we think that we are, like our senses of self and our psyche, and what it is that we think is real, like the way that we relate to a world outside of us, are really intricately connected, and they're both really deeply implicated in like the very early ways that we pattern in relationship with people. So who it is that we think that we are is always a relational thing, right? We're always having come out of an environment and developed in an environment, and then we sort of stand on top of that, and then we see a world that exists out there. And, that becomes essentially, this is not I don't mean this entirely negatively, but it is, it's a trap, or it's a prison. It's something which keeps us sort of limited and what's the word I'm looking for? Like prescribed. And by just kind of coming into contact with each other in a very slow, deliberate, purposeful kind of way, not only are we getting potentially the benefits of what it is that we get from a meditation practice when we're sitting by ourselves on the pillow, but we're getting those benefits precisely where it is that we're most conditioned to be like, this is just the way that life is, or just this is just the way that I am, or this is the way that the world is. And by bringing life and contact to that point, we're is something of a catalyst for a transformational inquiry or for a meditative inquiry.
I want to just say that that was such a beautiful description of the practice of circling. We sort of play this game, or it's this ongoing it's an ongoing inquiry, like what is circling in many ways. But if we're out in public or at an event that we're hosting, and someone asks us, we sort of take turns, like, okay, what is the the elevator pitch, or like the brief description of what circling is. And over time, over years, like, you hone it, and then sometimes it comes out and it's just right. And I feel like what you just did, I'm like, we should make that into a short. We're going to be.
Yeah. Send that link to people if they ask, just like, watch this video.
Yeah. Cause you did that preliminary kind of, few sentences, and then the slightly expanded version. I feel like I understand what circling is more than I ever have. So thank you for that, Andrew.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It feels like I have a little bit of I'm trying to drink some tea to keep my throat going, but it feels a little bit clunky. And then I'm like, you know, it's a strange context also to be in, because it's like, who am I talking to right now? Well, I'm talking to the two of you, and you guys know what the fuck circling is, right? But I'm also talking to these people that I don't know, you know, in an objective kind of sense. Like I have to give a definition for what the practice is, and that is always it's kind of a funny balancing act to find one in. So anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I have been refining that elevator pitch for a long fucking time. So
Yeah.
it's good to get that reflection back.
Yeah, and it sets up well, I think, using that as the space to explore, because one of the things you emphasize there is how in relationship with others is it is where ideology and like worldview and collective agreements about what is allowed to be real and what is allowed to create, like where knowledge is allowed to come from, it's the most defined there. That's why, like, if you go off alone for a week, one of the craziest parts is you like are not around people who keep telling you how reality is. It's like you need that reflected all the time. But then that means like when you're around people and you're in practice with them, like you're in this meditative practice with them, you can start to like soften up that binding and really kind of really explore in ways that then have like the social element in it. And you can just as I'm saying, I'm getting excited. So I'm like, yeah, I'm curious where that takes you.
What you just said, you mean?
Yeah, and that dimension of the practice, I guess. Like where does it live in your circling journey, using it as this almost like playground for reality?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we're there's something that is so obvious about life and about the way that we experience that is not obvious for a very long time, I think, when you start practicing, whether it's meditation or it's circling, right? And it's one of these things that can kind of hit you on the head all of a sudden, or come out of a bunch of mushrooms that you have just taken and put in your mouth, or it's something that can happen over a long period of time. And the way that I like to talk about it or think about it today, or share it with people, is that your experience always has, and it looks this way, so I'll bracket it that way, right? It looks like there's always this kind of double-sided nature of our experiences, right? Whether they're emotional experiences or they're thoughts or they're a bodily sensation or something. And the double-sided part of it is that your emotions are always, or your experience is always a thing in itself. It's always an event, something that happens in life. But it's also always referential at the same time. So it's not just about itself, it's about something else. For a long time when we're developing, it's almost impossible to tease those two things apart. Well, how do you tease those two things apart? Well, when I get angry, this is just an example. When I get angry, I'm angry because somebody did something, right? And when we're circling, again, because we're in this like intersubjective mess where like, we're constantly pinging off of each other and people are saying things and doing things and they have gestures and, they are having experiences and you're like, oh, they shouldn't be having that experience. They should be feeling this, or I want them to feel this, or whatever it is. Because we're doing this with people and we're doing it in a way intentionally and slowly, you get to see all of these places where you stitch yourself together that way and where it isn't actually obvious, hey, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling angry because that person did something. But no, the anger is real. The anger is valid. But the interpretation is something that you want to sort of remain open with, right? The interpretation isn't necessarily accurate because that's actually not the nature of our experiences. That's a really weird insight and can be a very uncomfortable insight. And then let me say too, because sometimes people go, especially in the personal development world, or if you've like been through therapy or you've done emotional work before, you might be practiced in recognizing that what my experience is constructed. I'm sort of dancing around the word constructed because it can get us into some rabbit holes. But like, you know, you're used to like, hey, I have a life history, and that life history determines the way that I show up in a certain way. My experience isn't just there in a given way. It's not just necessary or inevitable, right? It's the product of a number of different factors and a number of different conditions. When we're sitting down to circle, we're starting to untangle all of those things. So we can say, hey, I'm angry right now, and that's a real feeling. And whatever interpretation I'm having about that, that might not be right, without making the other mistake, or which would be saying, oh, all of my emotions are just subjective. They're only, some, random thing that's happening that really has no meaning or has no connection with the world around me. So that for me is what inquiry is. You're in this constant, affirmation, but also bracketing of what it is that you're experiencing as a being. So to me, that being able to recognize that about your own experience, not only in an intellectual way, that's something that's true. For some people, it appears obvious, but like in a moment-to-moment way when you're actually having quite an intense experience, right? So in the real world, that would be, you're having a fight with your partner, or you're reading about the ongoing collapse of the American, social fabric, or whatever it is, right? Being able to both be present with your experience. So I use inhabit for that side, right? For being able to inhabit your experience, inhabit your emotions without making them smaller or feeling ashamed of them, or needing to excuse them or whatever. But just like the anger is just anger, while at the same time recognizing that that's fully a fucking construction, and there's a billion different possibilities for, what somebody might also feel at that moment. That to me is really central to the core of what it is that we're doing when we're circling. We're not doing that because we're going for that, right? It's something that just comes out of like what happens if we get together and we're in contact, and we're just kind of, in this inquiry, this open, honest, present inquiry about what it's actually like to be here with each other. I'm not quite sure that I'm answering what your response was, but that's what it elicits in me.
It has me super curious your thoughts on this has been just super alive for me lately, this exact spot, particularly working with my 6-year-old son around blaming objects, blaming other people, blaming animals for his experience. And it has me recognizing, like, this is something, like, we naturally learn the blame game and the assigning, outside agency to our internal experience. That is a natural acquired way, at least in our culture. And then we have to learn this other way, this teasing apart, this sitting down and circling. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on why that is. Because it seems like the former, like the victim mindset, the blame game, the not teasing apart, is like worse for us relationally. But so I'm and it takes time and it takes effort to do the inquiry and to tease things apart, and then we get all these benefits. At least in my experience, I've gotten all of these benefits in my life as a result. It's a huge question, but I am just curious what like your thoughts on that are.
It is. You guys are asking me, it's like, well, this is why I write books, right? Because it's like, there's a very long, complicated, philosophical, response to that. And I don't quite want to do that. I think, there are a couple things that come up. One is like, these mechanisms are our perception is survival based, right? So all of these layers that we have as human beings to generate this sense of a real world out there, right? Those are always in relationship with am I going to survive, right? Am I going to live and how do I keep myself safe, right? And for any individual, you might say, hey, it would be a really good idea if you noticed that you were creating all of this, that this was actually a generation of your own mind and being, not like something that is necessarily happening to you from the outside. But that's not really helpful on a species level if, a snake is coming at you, right? Like, you want to run away from a snake as fast as possible, not like, be there and be in inquiry with like, is it a real snake? Is it going to bite? Is it, what kind of poison does it have? And all of these different things. So there's something about that. And then I think you need a sense, because related to that, you need a sense of like, imagine if you couldn't rely on whether or not the ground was going to be there when you stepped on it, right? If you weren't certain in an unconscious way that when you took a step that the ground was still going to be there, you wouldn't go anywhere, right? Like, it would be harrowing, and it's like not even maybe there's not even a drop, but it's like a 50-foot drop. Like, maybe somewhere, anywhere, there are these places where you step on them and they just drop 50 feet, right? And you would fall to your doom. Like, that would be terrifying. That would be constantly anxiety provoking. So we have these our meaning making apparatuses, our systems that tell us what it is that's going on around us and generate that sense of what is going on around us. They're skillful, and they're skillful in relationship to the sense of like, are we going to survive as an individual and as a species? It's only this is why it takes so long. It's only much later where it even becomes relevant to ask, is this like an optimal way of surviving? Right? Like, it's only so much late, because I'm 43, right? I made it up to this point. I have 2 children. Evolutionarily, I'm a success. It doesn't really matter whether I'm happy, whether I'm fulfilled, whether I have the sense of, being at one with the entire fucking universe from a survival perspective. That's all irrelevant. And, I think there's an argument to be made that in the long run, it isn't irrelevant. But I also, I'm not quite sure that's, I'm not quite sure what would come out of that answer if it's like, I have more time to pull and pull and pull and pull and pull. But my sense is it's got something to do with that. You need to have a sense of an objective world outside of you to be able to relate to it and to push off of it in whatever way, whatever shape it is that you take, right? Yeah. It's all going to be intelligent in some sense.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a satisfying beginning answer to that curiosity. I mean, there's also the idea that we're going to be prioritizing connection over authenticity, which is kind of another end of the spectrum, which is based on that survival piece as well. Like, as a small child, like, and so you start making these little compromises as a small child to maintain connection with your loved ones and with your caregivers. Yeah. It's not quite on the spot that I was on, but it's similar in terms of habit forming over time. Like the habit of the habit of surviving that we have.
Habit of surviving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I just want to highlight something that you said, which is like, and this is totally normal. Like, you want to, in my sense, I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination, but in my sense of like, how do you parent someone healthily, knowing that you're kind of making it up? Is, you're not trying to get them to think anything different than they're thinking. You're not trying to get them to feel anything different than they're feeling, but you are helping reflect to them what it is that they're thinking and feeling. And we're doing something kind of similar when we're circling. So it's like, wow, you're really mad at that, box, whatever it is, like a stupid box, right? And just like, yeah, that's what it is that you're feeling. When you have that basic sense of, which is why I think when we're circling, feeling met can feel so transformational in itself. When you have that basic sense of like, this is what it is that I'm doing, it's already an object to you a little bit, right? You have a little bit of reflection on it. And whether that is, as obviously a 6-year-old has certain limitations to what they're able to cognize. But if you do that as a 6-year-old, the older that you get, the easier that it is for you to be able to do that for yourself. And I've seen that with my daughter, who is 12, but has a really refined sense of, oh, her emotions are coming from this factor and that factor, and sometimes she feels this way and sometimes she feels that way. She's able to put sentences together and say something to me which is self-reflective in ways like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude better than I was able to do as a 12-year-old, right? As a 12-year-old, I had none of that. I had none of that sense going on, right? So, yeah, I just think I think in being alongside your child's journey, then you're not trying to get them to do it better or get them to get faster at it or get them to, right? But just by being present, you do have that impact on them. The impact of that kind of process speeding up, something like that.
Yeah.
There's something in there for me about what makes social connection just so essential from the very ground up, is this being met and being and just being reflected in someone else. A lot of people will say this about wanting a partner, is that they want someone to witness their life. I think that there is just there are just a trillion different ways that we are able to make more sense and see more things and just to be more assured of what we see, when you have even just one other person looking at the same thing and being like, rock.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
it's a rock.
Yeah,
And
totally.
there's a certainty that comes with social agreement it is number one with a bullet certainty. It's just like there's something when everyone agree, the larger and larger the group is that you can agree, but then what happens is that what gets congealed in that can sometimes be not necessarily true.
Yeah.
We can all agree on a number of things, and then it feels extremely true, and that is so wonderful, and it allows for such amazing operating in the world, and it allows for a lot of confidence. But then at the end of the day, they are just stories about what is true. It's constitutive. It creates reality more than it necessarily reflects it. And
Yeah.
I think that circling is the best technology I've ever found to live in the moment explore that.
Yeah.
In philosophy you can do it, but it's always sitting back and sort of imagining a story on top of the old story and trying to believe it or something. Circling, you experience
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think there's something. This has been a blind. It's less of a blind spot today, but it's been a blind spot of our, Western intellectual culture. It's like essentially you are having an experience that relates in some way with the world, and we do this in ways that you don't have to be a philosopher to be doing one of these things. Everybody that shows up to circling usually has one of these two biases. You have the bias of my emotions are valid, or you have the bias of, well, everything's just kind of being made up, right? And it's why there's two really fascinating threads that relate to that for me that I love. One of them is, that's why the measurement of the measurement of a master in the traditions is not whether they're correct or not; it's skillfulness, right? How good are they at embodying the truth that they are talking about in a way that makes the connection to the person that they're sitting with? And the same thing can be said of circling, even though when we're facilitating, we're not teaching exactly, right? We're not doing that. But the capacity that you have to be able to make that connection with somebody in front of you is also a quality of skillfulness. There's no correct way of doing it, right? And there are kind of bad ways of doing it maybe, but they're not wrong. It's not the same, it's not that measurement. The other thing that I find really interesting is in this question of like, well, how do we generate this world? Because it's not just me, right? It's not just me and the world. There's this big we that I'm doing that in relationship with. And as I think you were recording already, but you were saying, you know, uh, uh, we do that in ways that are constant. Like we're constantly reflecting what it is that's real and what it is that is acceptable and what it is that is happening and who it is that you are and who it is that I am. That's happening in all of our interactions all of the time. So what I love about that is, well, what if we as a group are not agreeing necessarily on a reality, are not agreeing on something that is real in an ontological sense, but we're agreeing on these rules of the game, basically these questions of what is it, how is it, and what is it that we are relating with? What are the rules of engagement when we're sitting and relating with each other? In a certain sense, we're doing that when we're circling, right? We're saying this is the context, this is what's in bounds, this is what's out of bounds. But when you're able to do that individually, when you're able to um, uh, have this kind of constant sense of inquiry about what it is that's happening around you in a way that you're neither so blown open that you can't, feed your child, neither are you so narrow that you're just, constantly obsessed with, sleep and food or whatever the basic, your basic sort of survival needs are. You walk around in a very different, with a very different potential for generating something new in this life. And my sense is what it is, part of the experience that I was talking about before when I was with my master's degree group is, the immediate sense of, hey, we're going to do this in the future. Like, this is actually how humans are going to be not only relating with each other, but like organizing how we build a world. And, that for me feels like it's a long-term thing. Right. When I was 26 when I started that program, or 28, I think. And like, having that experience, it's a spiritual experience, it's an awakening experience, right? Having that experience, I came out of that like, holy fuck, this is about to happen now. Like, we're going to change the world. We're going to, it's going to be this fire. It's going to take everything over. People are going to wake up. We're going to have these we space governments and all of this shit. Right. And it's like, it's a little bit slower than that. I banged my head against that for a couple of years and have come to a very different understanding. But I still just as fervently believe that, like, yeah, at a certain point, we're going to wake up in this way. We're going to figure this shit out. We're going to realize that, it's not, is it subjective or is it objective? Like, no, it's all of it. It's happening all the time. And we're creating it, not like an author in a book, but like someone surfing a wave, right? There are these creative potentials and powers within us that we barely have contact with because we don't have, they're not between us, like they're not awake between us. That is, what this life is about, as far as I can tell at this moment.
That really struck me, that they're not awake because they're not between us. Or they're not awake between us, I think is how you said it. And yeah, like I'm wondering if we can like open that up a little bit more. I think what I'm getting from what you're saying is that we are co-creating reality, all of us, at every given, and it's like in real time. And so if there is intentionality set behind what we are endeavoring to co-create, that is where like miracles and like amazing things can open up and happen. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Can you say like a little more about that? Because I think just hearing that, it's like, well, how is that possible? Like, I'm looking at this desk and you're looking at this desk and the desk is here. Like, we both see it. You can't see it because you're over there, but yeah, like I guess, yeah, like how is that possible? I believe
Right.
it's possible. I don't know why I believe that, but I do.
Like, how could it not just be a desk?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but it is just a desk. So like the there's a very tricky point here,
Mm-hmm.
which I wouldn't say that I'm skipping over, but I'm not, and I think it is relevant to a certain extent. But um, things the things that are in the world, the objects that are around you, they are neither real nor are nor are they fake, nor are they unreal, right? The sense of them being real or not, of either being just like something you could put your hand through because it's not there, or like it's real, it's solid, it's the only thing we can really say for sure actually is out there. It's the sense that those two things are categorically different. That's the thing that your mind is doing that it can't get over. And that's hard to see through. That is a different order of magnitude than like, oh, I'm kind of generating the experience that I'm having, right? The word that I use for that is a reality location. So it's not, again, and there's all these different ways of saying it, but like, I have an experience and there's a world in that experience, right? My sense, not that those are different, but that the difference between those things is real as such, that's a metaphysical reality, that's the lock. That's the thing that keeps it in place. So again, it's not that these things are unreal. Like my son, very real, 2-year-old. When he cries, I respond to him, right? But not real in the like bedrock kind of sense, right? Not real in the way that we tend to think of it as being real, as being opposed to unreal, right? That's a view. When that clicks, when that makes sense, when it's no longer bothering you internally, then you're able to respond appropriately to whatever it is that's happening around you. That's the sense of skillfulness. That might be a fantasy, right? I don't know that that's ever 100% or anything like that. In the traditions, they would say that that's 100%. That's a very real thing. I don't know. I'm a little bit more agnostic about that. My sense is when we're able to be in that place together, not only are we the line that is no longer real is not the line between what is inside of me and outside of me, meaning the world. It's what is inside of me and what is inside of you, right? And that recognition, that understanding, seeing that is the basis of what awakened interbeing is, the basis of what we space is, and it's a practice of view because it's actually already there. You're actually already consciousness in the same way that I'm already consciousness, and we're practicing that by noticing the view, by recognizing it, and then just seeing all of the different ways that we act as if that is not the case show up. Doesn't mean that Andrew, that the individual being that is within here has access to your thoughts in the way that you do necessarily, but it does mean that the way that I construct myself is not pushing off of this assumption that you and I are inherently separate and not also at the same time the same thing. That's a fucking that's a volume of books. That's not just one book. There's a lot of depth to that.
What comes up for me is this potential that opens up if we all inside a practice community grok that and take that on as the sort of the thing that we are going to, the lens we're going to look through as we enter into circling. What is really interesting for me is almost less the getting that knowing, but then what you can actually do with the knowing is that then there is a place of creative play that opens up and sort of wielding of your desire and your and just like the sheer enjoyment of playing and making moves inside this new realm that becomes available, this of like of this dance between the it's not even two realities, but the like mind melting differences and inherent unity between like reality, like knock on wood reality, and then the intersubjective interpretation of it. So there's play available. There's like play available in this new understanding that we can do together.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's extraordinarily generative in the glimpses, in the glimpses that I have had to these things with other people, like extraordinarily generative. Because you're not any different. Like what it is that we are is not any different than what all of this is, and that that power that is inherent to us is the same power that all of this is. There's no difference between those things. You can differentiate them. Obviously, this person in time, in linear time, this human being, this mortal form is going to die, right? I'm not the God with a capital G inclusive of all of that, right? But what it is that I am is that. There isn't a difference under the hood, right?
I'm sensing this like, well, kind of in the way that you said these glimpses, and that like hit me like an arrow, because we've also had these glimpses, and not I wouldn't say that there's been long-term experiences or like a group of people that we can reliably get into these states with, where that generative like availability of that generative field is. And I have this other sense that like we're all, all three of us are so interested in like how can we reliably that circling does reliably create that field. And for us, at least for Jonathan and I, like we kind of fancy ourselves like the evangelists of circling. Like how can we get more people like fully integrated into this thing we call circling, but it's ultimately so that we can then play in this other arena. And that is kind of maybe what the topic of this that we had like set for this. So I feel like we're right on the spot right now, and I'm just wondering where we could go with this now.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. The thing that it elicits in me is almost more I wouldn't say sobering. I think so. I relate to the practice of circling as having a number of different layers. So the one that we kind of started to talk about, and when I say circling, I tend to mean the earliest layer. And that earliest layer, or I'm get careful not to think early is not the right word, but the most basic layer, right, is entering into our experience with this kind of meditative awareness and presence and intention, and what comes out of that, among a number of other things, right? So this is not definitive, but what comes out of that, the basic skill that I'm looking for when I work with people in knowing that they're ready to kind of move on from this, is a sense of what I call self-reflexivity. And we've been talking about that in this call without naming it as such. But that's basically like, can I be fully inhabiting my experience, especially when I'm fucking triggered and upset or whatever it is, and at the same time recognize that is a construction, right? And that for me is one of the reasons why circling is a practice of awakening. That's necessary and helpful to clear in the tradition that I'm most closely allied with. They're called veils or clouds of awareness, right? So the sense of like, Jimmy did something to me is, you're not going to be able to maintain awakeness with the sense of fucking Jimmy did something to me, right? But that's the most basic, that's the first layer. And still, I think a lot of people, it's hard to get people attracted to that, even though there's a sense, I think for the three of us, there's a sense of like, there's infinite value here. This is infinitely fucking valuable, right? And it's still hard to get people to sign up for that, largely because they might not be ready for it. The things that we're training when we're circling are still a great deal more mature than where most people are in our society are attracted to, right? You have to have some layer of that basic sense that it is a worthy thing to do to turn your attention inwards, and that isn't the case for. It's the case for the people in our like small circle of the niche world, right? Yeah. But it's not. It's the small niche, but it's not the case for them. Even people that we might be close friends with, and we might know they have no interest in doing that thing. Some of that's just temperamental. There's a type of person that attracts circling, but some of it is, you really need to recognize that there is value in picking apart your fucking meaning-making system, right? For most people, that's just kind of weird and that's bizarre. That's still the first layer of that. Yeah. Then some people are attracted to the second layer. So the second layer is I call it open circling. The relatefulness camp calls it flow circling, surrendered leadership, what have you, right? There are people that are attracted to that layer because it's way more intense. And you can sometimes make a connection with the sense of possibility and the sense of exploration and the sense of, just uh, uh, of feeling at home in that kind of inquiry with that layer without having passed through that first layer. And that tends to burn people out in my opinion. Right, when you get pulled into the intensity of that intersubjective field, but you can't maintain the sense of like, hey, I'm kind of making all of this up as I go along. People tend to get burned out because you're going to start to have a kind of an experience that is an intensity that you can't maintain that self-reflexivity with, and then you're caught in whatever story is trying to catch you. Right, that's still not awakeness, right? That's still a different, that's still a deeper layer of personality, but it's still, it's archetypical. It's very, very subtle, it deals with a lot of polarity, but you're still in and out of the sense of being an individual, being the field, being an individual, being the field, being an individual, being the field. The kinds of intensity that I think are necessary to be able to, and so then there's two more fucking layers before I think a group of people can actually hold the kind of intensity that arises with the depth of awakening that we're talking about in order to turn that awakening out into the world and not fucking burn everything down and collapse. We're in a very similar, in an analogous way to if you ask someone to have an intimate conversation with their boss or something, or they're an intimate conversation with their stranger, they're going to find like places in themselves that they're not comfortable to go in, or that they can't maintain awareness in, or they're going to become reactive, or they're going to whatever. That's the same thing. But every time we move up one of those levels, one of those layers, it's like it's an order of magnitude more intensity, an order of magnitude more intensity. And so the practice that I recommend for people, so it's helpful to do awakening practice. Helpful to do that on the side. You can do it in a way not connected with intersubjectivity at all. And it's helpful to do these intersubjective practices, but the core practice is like, how much fucking intensity can you bear without collapsing it down, right? How much intensity can you bear interpersonally without turning it into a story that you necessarily believe, right? Without believing something about the person that is across from you. We're into, I said this earlier, like the basic thing that we're looking at is really profoundly strange for the way that most people relate with what is real. It's really profoundly strange, even if you think, hey, this is all a divine play that is being, made up, and I'm a co-creator with that divine play. If you peek underneath the hood of what that person means by that and how they're doing that in every moment of their life, it's not that different from the people who are who would find it profoundly weird, the suggestion that, you're kind of making you're making this experience up. You're not looking at something out there. The thing that you're looking at is your mind, right? That's a kind of truism. Bizarre, totally fucking strange for 99% of the people that are walking on the planet today. So my response is both this, like, I'm trying, like, everything in this being is oriented towards trying to make this possible for humanity in a very real way. And I'm neither hopeful nor despondent about that happening in any timeline that I would recognize, right? Like, I want
That's
this.
very non-dual of you, Andrew.
Yeah, neither hopeful nor despondent.
I am both, or I'm both. Like, it's all of them, right? I would love to experience this shit, man. Holy fuck! I know it. It feels true, right? It feels true in the things in this individual being that are the most true about this individual being, and at the same time, like hundreds of years, maybe. Like, fucking, I have no idea, right? I'm not pushing it off. Like, I'm going to try to make it happen now. I want it to happen in this life, right? But I am also, because of that, I am trying to lay the groundwork for what I think needs to be in place before we're able to enter into that in a way that is actually responsible and generative and and self-sustaining. And I don't know that anybody knows what those things actually are. Like, what is it that takes? I don't know. So
the layers you're talking about feel like a really good map to bring a large number of people, at least to get their ass through the door to their first circling event. That's the biggest challenge, I think, is just to get someone into a circling event. But then you were laying out these different layers. I noticed just for me, there's this desire I'm trying to hide behind the utility of the podcast framework. Like, okay, how can I make this? I just want to know the rest of the layers. You said there's like basic circling. Yeah. Then there's like surrendered leadership and that kind of field. And then you were like, oh, and then there are two others. And then, there's like persistent awakened collective states. Yeah, and I'm curious, like, what those levels are, because I think they would give me a good sense of like how you're seeing the developmental progress to this state.
Sure. So, so there's circling. Let me. So there's circling. Let me say, dude, this is my way of orienting to this, right? This is not intended to be, but I find it helpful to organize my own thinking. So. And the way that I relate to people and all of this. So I hold all of this within the context of awakening, right? Within the context of this is the thing that we're moving towards, but in a way that undergirds like that first layer of circling. Like I would never ask someone in that first layer necessarily to take on a practice of awakening. But a certain percentage of people I think are going to be, drawn towards that. So just as a caveat, so there's circling, there's anchor circling, and that's birthday circling. There's a focus, there's a facilitator, and you're just being there with this layer of sort of personal experience, right? That opens up into transpersonal experiences. It happens all the time, right? But we're not doing it because of that. And if it doesn't happen, it's not a big deal. You don't need to enter into those spaces. You're just practicing, like, what is it actually like to be here? What is it like to be here with this person, right? What is this person's generator function for their psyche, for their self, the small less self, right? I think people are ready for the next layer when they're capable of recognizing in most situations, hey, I'm the one doing this, right? And there are other ways of doing it. That's open circling. Open circling is an order of magnitude more complex because you now no longer have the basic structure of we're paying attention to this person and this person is facilitating, right? So there's a whole spectrum of, either organic circling, like where I'm still facilitating and we're basically paying attention to that person, but I'm letting the awareness and the attention sort of wander a little bit more, to like a radically surrendered space where we're attempting basically not to have any structure on top of the thing, right? There's a rabbit hole there, but that's a lot more complex, and it initiates a lot deeper, a lot of the deeper layers of the way that we construct ourselves, right? Or it initiates, it invigorates. What's the word I'm looking for? Like animates a lot of those more deeper layers. Those layers are transpersonal, right? There's soul layers, they're archetypical layers, they are. I've seen crazy shit at a collective level as well, right? Collective wisdom starts to rise up. Transpersonal states become a lot more likely and a lot more accessible. If you have the people who are participating in that space grounded in the sense of their capacity to be able to be with their own intensity without collapsing it into, some kind of certainty or story, then that becomes much more likely, right? And it becomes much more present, much more welcome. I don't have the same kind of like, blah, 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 blah. I don't have a sense of like, there are people who are then ready for the next thing, but the feeling is something like you are, you're not as compelled by these experiences, which can be super intense and super fucking fascinating, right? And the reason why that's important is because, and I just need to stick this in here before we go into before we go into awakening. But awakening is not a state. And that's also a really weird thing to try and wrap your mind around, because everything that we experience is a state. But awakening is not an experience. You can have an experience of your awareness. You can have an experience that comes along with an awakening experience. And we don't have really good language for this. And so people will talk about an awakening experience and sort of conflate what it is that you're experiencing with what awakeness is. That's also a really confusing fucking thing, and a very difficult thing to, it takes a long time to really integrate that into the person that you are in a day-to-day way, right? That third layer is awakening interbeing would be the practice, and then awakened interbeing would be the kind of condition that we're looking for. And I use condition instead of state, because it isn't a state, but you're essentially looking for the direct kind of recognition in a similar way, or in a way that's analogous to a personal practice. You're looking for the direct recognition of like, right, we're just consciousness. Consciousness is already awake. It already has been. There isn't a sense of that being in time, but it also shows up as all of this that's happening in time. And it's something that is, even to call it shared isn't, because it's underneath what we are before we're coming together as separate beings to share anything, right? That direct recognition, that's the thing that we're practicing in awakening interbeing. That looks like a million different things. It looks like open circles with a very different kind of context setting, but it can also look like very, very structured practices. The sense of structure as being confining to consciousness is not so much that has broken down before you start to enter that realm. There's no difference between whether you're formally sitting in a practice or whether you are informally, just practicing because it's what consciousness is doing by itself. Everything at this point is like, this is not entirely theoretical. I've had experiences and guide people with this a little bit. Everything beyond here is entirely theoretical because I don't know any group that is doing this. But at a certain point, my sense is, what it means to be, what's the Thich Nhat Hanh phrase, which is famous, the next Buddha is the Sangha, right? I think he's talking about that layer. And when that starts to become coherent, right? When people are able to be living from that space in a day-to-day way, and that we are not even talking about like social structures and shit like that, right? This is just the inner experience of that. When people are able to live in that in a kind of day-to-day way, then I think you're starting to condition the world around you from that place in a way that is generating the way that life shows up. And we can look at that from a totally fucking materialist way, where it's just like, the choices that group is going to make as an organization are going to look really fucking different than the choices that an organization, is going to make that is a bunch of egos that are banging off of each other, right? And we can look at it, of course, from like a super woo-woo way, which is like, yeah, when you're, I think of it like a satellite array, right? If you as a being have some kind of magical capacity in the world to create the world around you, that only amplifies the more people that you get. It's not 1 + 1. It's not 1 + 1 + 1. Like it's 1 to the power of 1 to the, that would be 1. But it's like, it's like every person who is in that kind of a coherency with each other, and it's not a state coherency and it's not a belief coherency, but every person that's able to enter into that is like another fucking universe of power being added to this, satellite array in that metaphor. So those are the layers as I see them. Some of them, as I said, are much more theoretical than others, but there's a sense of like, I believe that that's true. I think that that's happening here. And I think that because of a raft of different experiences that I've had and of trying to deal with those experiences and think through them and, read tons of other people who are talking about similar things. Like that's my sense of what it is that's going on here. And there's no guarantee that we reach any of that, right? Like that's
or
again,
stay there if you do reach it. Yeah.
Or stay there, right?
That has me curious back to the stages versus, or states versus stages, or states versus condition. Because I think I have had the experience of being in a state like that with a group
Yeah.
for an extended period of time, not
Yeah.
together in physical
Yep.
location.
Yep.
But it didn't last.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, oh, does that mean it was a state? Or like, what were the things that were, and I think it was a state. I mean, that I'm answering my own question because we were talking about the condition of awakening being the ground in which, a group of people could then reach these other, maybe experiences.
It's hard to talk about it. It's hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about.
Sorry.
Something that came up for me that I felt like was really grounding me in what you were saying, especially about like the field effects of once people start coming on to persistent awakening and that they start coming online in connection with each other. Something that was coming up for me was like we live by this beautiful forest. And you can go, I mean, if you look out our windows right now, it's just this beautiful forest right now covered in ice. And there are a lot of ways that you can see a forest. Like you can see a forest as a collection of resources that are to be eaten up by certain tools. And I've had that experience a lot. Like when I was a kid playing real-time strategy games and playing StarCraft and seeing like, oh, there are, or like Age of Empires, and like there are trees. We need to go chop down the trees, and the trees are going to become, buildings. Da, 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 da. There's like this way of looking at it. There's also like when I have my dog with me, I'm like, there's an adventure out here. There's like a world of smells and beautiful sights that we're going to go. And it's, and I can just feel like in the like energetic sinuses of the world itself, I just feel the love between me and my dog as I imagine us going into the forest. And then, and then there are other things like the forest is also like this place of like ghosts and fairies, and it's like kind of magical. And it's like when I'm with a group of people, the way we see that forest is so important to the future of the forest. It's so important to how like material reality is organized on this plane that is very, I mean, no matter who you ask, from the most woo to the most who, this is important. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I knew that would pop, Psy. Yeah, there's this way. So it's like, and if someone comes into like we are the gardeners of the forest or something, and then it's not just one person, but then there's like 5 people who feel that way. All of a sudden, the future of the forest radically changes. And so we're talking about like the forest of being itself. But there's a very I feel like in that there's like this practical thing I can hold on to of like, that I experience every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because you were like, oh, there's something really grounding about what Andrew said. And I was on the opposite side where I was like up here, like not in any way grounded whatsoever. But your recap kind of brought me back down to the level of the forest.
You guys inhabiting the opposite poles of the message that I'm sending.
Yes.
That's funny. Yeah. Just get a sense of, I'm looking out of my window right now. I'm not looking at the sun, but the sun is setting here. And I've spent a lot of time today like looking out of this window as I've been writing and just giving my eyes a break or thinking about something or trying to word something. But in relationship with the thing that you were just saying, Jonathan, it brings out that sense of like, right, we're talking right now at a distance, but the sunlight is the same. And, we're talking at a distance, but the mind that is talking is the same, right? Like you can look at it as being a technological miracle or whatever, but like you're in Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in Virginia, but Virginia is in here, right? and I'm in Amsterdam, but Amsterdam is in here. I mean, it's in here as well, but and there's something that really, the beauty of the sunlight hitting the waves beneath me, and bouncing off of the houseboats that I'm looking at, and all of that. For whatever reason, the beauty of that sunlight being the same sunlight that is illuminating the place that you're sitting on the planet, for me, is a direct pointer to the thing that we keep, we're kind of furiously trying to figure out, the three humans that we are, coming together and talking. And it just feels like a appropriate and a beautiful thing to share as I'm looking at it. It's what is loudest in my experience.
That feels such a beautiful note to take us out on.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. I'm curious. One last question. How do people get in contact with you? How do they take in more of your work, and how do they follow everything that you do?
Working on it. So there's a non-joke answer to that. So I have a website, which is andrewlewisvenezia.life. I'm sure my name will be on the thing that you put out. So you can go there and get in touch with me. I love to, my first point of contact with a lot of people is having a call for an hour and basically just going to like, where are you generating your reality, right? What's the thing that you're doing that is making you you? That can be a very, I have a friend who says that I'm a mild psychedelic. Like, just being in contact with me is something of a mild psychedelic. These calls can be a kind of psychedelic sort of experience, but they all look different. They're very different things. So that's kind of the point. That's the first point of contact with me. You can also follow me on Facebook. I am trying to answer that question in a way that is easier and that telegraphs some of the value that I'm bringing to people in a way that connects with them. So we'll see. But that's the simple answer to it.
But people can book a call with you on your website, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I do we're about a workshop a month, something like that. I work with people one-on-one. I do trips with people. A lot of that is, it runs the gamut, and everything from like, healing developmental trauma to like having an experience of being without any fucking concepts on top of it, and then helping to integrate that into life. So there's a pretty broad swath of the things that I do, but it's all focused on like, what is it like to be you, and at finding the core of life at the core of you, something like that.
Yeah.
Recognizing that your mind is awake, being able to bring that into your day-to-day life. Those are the things that I work with.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on The Container.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The container is now closed. Keep it namaste.
Keep it namaste. That was authentic.